With chaos at the New York Stock Exchange.
Get back in there at once and sell! Sell!
We are looking at major records for the Dow.
Now is the time to buy.
Well, the law of gravity hit Wall Street today.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5%. The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
You gonna do something or just stand there and bleed?
The whole town's going crazy.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Big Money Report. I'm your host, David Booth, President and Financial Advisor at BIG Investment Services. That's BIG, Booth Investment Group. We're full-service financial advisory based out of Dover, Delaware, serving clients all across this great country. And you can read all about us at abigplan.com. That's www.abigplan.com. I like to put the show together once a week just to give you a recap of the week behind and a peek at the week and weeks to come. Trying to keep you up to speed with you and your money and the competition informed because they tune in every now and then, and that's quite all right. So we're glad you're with us today. It is Friday, May 17th, 2024. I want to start off with a couple shout outs to a couple of Daniels. First, Daniel, my brother, who is going to be having his birthday this weekend. So happy birthday to him. And to another Daniel who is working on his financial exams right now. He is going to become the newest addition to BIG, and we are totally psyched about it. A super sharp guy. Very excited to have him coming on board in the near future. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into the numbers. Good week this week. Dow Jones up 1.2%. The S&P 500 up 1.5%. The NASDAQ Composite up 2.1%. And the Russell Small Caps up 1.7%. We saw the long-term bonds this week, the TLT, also up a bit this week, up 1.4%, mainly because they're expecting the Fed to kind of hold pat and still look to cut. You know, we had another CPI number this week, another consumer price index number, and the market liked it. I was a little concerned coming into this week. If we got another hot number, the market could respond pretty negatively, but it did not. The number was okay. And the market did respond positively to that. Looking at the volatility index, it is just down to a really low number now. I mean, 11.9 on the VIX, the VIX. It was down 4.5% this week. And we take a look at the sectors. Just about everything was up except industrials. They were down a tick this week. You can thank John Deere for that. But everything else was up pretty nicely. Technology up 3%. I mean, semiconductors kind of drove that. They were up 3.1% this week. Retail sales were up a couple percent. So that was good to see. Staples up a little bit. Energy. I mean, just everything across the board. As a matter of fact, everything was kind of up this week, including gold, including silver, bonds, stocks. I mean, everything's just kind of moving higher. I don't like that, just so you know. Okay, it's a little concerning. A couple of things that concern me this week. One, everything's going higher. Everything, right? It's the everything rally this week with every asset class moving upward. In addition to that, the meme stocks, you may recall this from a couple years ago. There's a couple of really lousy company stocks that are on their way out the door unless they're saved by some miracle. There's a lot of short interest in these stocks. In other words, a lot of investors betting that these stocks are going to go lower and eventually maybe even go out of business. And there's a handful of folks out there in the marketplace on the internet that have been jumping on these companies. They did it a couple years ago and really drove what we called a short squeeze. In other words, they just started gobbling up these shares of stock and forced these other investors betting against these companies to cover their short positions, meaning they had to buy a lot of stock to eliminate that short position that they had. And it just drives the stock up even further. Well, anyway, this thing happened a couple years ago. It was GameStop. You might remember people talking about that, and AMC and a few others. Well, that came back into vogue earlier this week. These stocks were up, 120% like in a day, and just ridiculous things. And they've all collapsed again by the end of the week. But the point of me bringing it up is it's this sense of risk that's brewing right now, and people kind of jumping in and putting money back to work in a way that's not very sound or reasonable. That's concerning. So everything's rising. You've got the speculative, really, I would consider gambling aspect of the market kind of in full swing. That's just not a comfortable setup. And then when you couple that with all of the indicators right now, the S&P oscillator running hot, that suggests that the market's due for a pullback. the DeMark indicators flashing another sell signal this week. I told you last week that we were getting close to that. Well, it flashed the sell signal here at the end of the week, not just on the daily, but also on a weekly. We got another sell on the weekly as well. So there's a few things here that just have me kind of cautious about what lies ahead in the very short term. So again, I study both fundamentals and technical analysis in great detail. And I can't say that I'm the best at either one, because if I were to be the best, I'd have to dedicate all of my time doing that and that alone. But I do know who I believe are some of the best in the world in these areas, and I consult with them on a regular basis. And on the technical side of things, look, longer term, I think the market's setting itself up to go a bit higher. We've been talking about a 6,000, maybe 6,100 level on the S&P 500 at some point, not this year necessarily, but maybe into 2025. But in the very short term, I just mentioned all these things that point to the market potentially pulling back. Next week's, I think, is going to be kind of crucial. If the S&P 500, which closed the week at 5303, if it holds above 5260 by next Friday, then maybe the market's going to continue to melt upwards. Maybe things are going to continue to go higher. If it does fall below that, then I think we're probably in store for another short-term pullback of some kind. The 3 to 7%, could be steeper, could be 7 to 10. I would love to see the S&P 500 really test that 200-day moving average, which is around 4733 on the S&P. That's a pretty big move down from here. Not sure we'll get that, but even if it gets down around 4,900, something like that, where it was about a month and a half ago, that'd be fantastic. So I know it sounds odd, right, for me to say it's fantastic, but I think it would be healthy. Market just feels a little bit ahead of itself at the moment. So that's kind of where things are. I didn't do any buying this week. We've done some selling in the last few weeks. We raised some cash. I almost did a little more selling today, but I didn't, because I'd be selling stocks that I still believe in quite a bit and I still think are pretty fairly valued and still don't represent too much of our models, right? They haven't gotten so big where they are grossly overweight. So didn't do any trimming this week. I've got some cash on hand, though, that we've accumulated by doing some more trimming weeks prior. And I'm really looking to put that money to work. So we're going to wait and see how things shake out. There's a big earnings report next week. NVIDIA, the chip company. We don't own that one in our models. We've been playing the AI chips with AMD, which I think is a great company. Lisa Su, a fantastic CEO. And AMD is in a position to grab market share from NVIDIA. NVIDIA's got all the market share to lose right now. So I kind of prefer to play this space with companies that could be chipping in. What? Did I just say that? Talking about chips? Chipping away. I just can't help myself. Oh, the puns here. I didn't do that on purpose either. I wish I had. But I want to play this space using a company that's going to be chipping away at the market share of NVIDIA, and that's why we're using AMD. But nonetheless, NVIDIA is going to report next week. All eyes are going to be on that stock. And if something's just not quite up to par, I think you could see a pretty sizable shakeup in the market. So we're going to be watching that one pretty close. I think their numbers are going to be pretty good on the revenue side of things, because all the major AI players, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, they're spending tons of money trying to get these chips to build their artificial intelligence offerings. So I think top line is going to be okay on NVIDIA. But what's going to be interesting is the margins. There's more competition developing. AMD, even Intel has announced some chips that they're working with for artificial intelligence. They actually said their chips faster than NVIDIA's. So, and then there's the companies themselves. Microsoft's talking about developing their own chips, as are others. So, it's going to be something I think is going to be market moving when it happens. And I'll be watching that. Otherwise, there'll be some economic data that comes out. But really, earnings season is kind of winding down. So we're going to be going through this kind of quiet period where there won't be a whole lot to drive things. Again, I think the setup is kind of ripe for a pullback. And I think it could start this coming week. Or we'll get confirmation of this most latest breakout. And the S&P will hold above 5260 by next Friday, which kind of gives me the green light to maybe put some more capital to work right now. I don't think I'll wait. So that's what we're doing, and that's what we're watching. All that included, things are looking pretty good. So with all that said, between now and next few meetings, you're thinking about your future, your long-term goals, all the things you want to do with you and your money. Maybe it's celebrate your birthday in style, in a big way. Maybe it is invest in your education so you can join a really successful financial planning and wealth management firm. Maybe it's retire a little early or buy that second house. Hey, you know what your goals are. Don't just dream about them. Don't just think about them. Think big. Think BIG. And I will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Big Money Report with your host, David Booth, President and Financial Advisor at BIG Investment Services. For more information on BIG and how you can access their planning and investment management services, visit them at abigplan.com. That's abigplan.com. Or call them toll-free at 866-946-PLAN. That's 866-946-7526. The foregoing content reflects the opinions of David Booth and Booth Investment Group Incorporated and is subject to change at any time without notice. There's no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. Please consult a professional before investing.